Hello there, and welcome along. The Gardener Ben here with not a brand new rose review, but rather a recap on the very first rose I ever brought you a personal growing review on. Now, this particular video was posted in 2001 to Instagram only, and with problems with mobile phone memory was deleted over a period of time and has never migrated its way to TikTok or YouTube. And now I'm not in control of the video. I thought I would actually come back to this particular rose because it's a really useful one in the garden, but one that should be approached with absolute caution. Now, you'll have to excuse me this morning because I'm actually trying to be as careful and as quiet as possible, because this particular climbing rose is actually grown up the very back of the east side of the cottage, and just a couple of feet around the corner are actually a family of wrens nesting right up underneath the eaves of the thatch. I don't want to disturb them, so we're going to be as quiet as possible. Now, this particular rose is really important because it actually is one of the few climbing and rambling roses you can plant against a north or an east facing aspect wall, and it will still flower relatively well. The rose behind me is Madame Alfred carriere, made very popular by a very famous online BBC Gardeners World gardener who planted one of these at his garden. Monty Don has one of these. Now, this particular rose, I'm going to cut it for you so we can bring it close to you. As I say, it will thrive quite nicely in very deep shade, receiving around 4 to 5 hours of direct sunlight per day. Madame Alfred carriere is a rambling or climbing rose. It's quite large, so do approach this one with caution. This one reaches in excess of 25 feet tall. Bred and introduced in 1879, this is a really old variety. It has incredibly pale green foliage, very light green, very soft to the touch. It's really quite delicate and very feathery in its texture. Flowers are born from the beginning of June all the way through to the back end of July and August. Now, in my particular opinion, this rose has never produced a massive flush of flowers as you would normally see with a traditional rambling or climbing rose. This particular one produces dozens of blooms at the very beginning of June, and then for me, a smattering. So in 3s and 4s and half dozens throughout the rest of the season, but never a huge flush and never a consecutive flushes thereafter. More a smattering, maybe 5 or 6 dozen blooms on the plant at once, and then maybe 5 or 6 every so often. So it's really quite nice. Flowers are really large. They're very informal. They look very much like intersectional peony, very loose and open formed. I would class this as being semi-double, not a full double rose, with maybe 5 or 6 rows of petals. It is the softest of whites, with a slight blushing of apple blossom pink and a slight amount of apricot. Now, it's a really lovely rose, and really importantly, this one also has a beautiful fragrance. It's incredibly floral. It's light with citrus notes. Really is very pleasant indeed. However, things to be aware of. Not only is this rose particularly large, reaching in excess of 25 feet in height, it also is very difficult to train. It has incredibly woody, strong and very stiff stems that aren't particularly easy to bring down into the 45 or 90 degree angle. This particular climbing rose is going to be done better as a fan train. And the problem with obviously fan training is if you have a large space, especially with a rose that is going to be looking for light, because you're going to be planting this on a north or an east facing aspect. Now, you can plant this on another aspect, it will do just as well, but it will take the deep shade. It is going to run to the top of that particular space and produce all these lovely flowers right at the very top. So not ideal. I treat mine as a sort of a large informal shrub, and it's here planted in a really large oak barrel, because obviously we don't have a massive amount of height to train roses up the house. So I treat it as a large shrub, informal shrub, and just loosely tie it in. Some parts I do pull around the side of the cottage and grow underneath the windows, because it obviously does take the shade. But this one is not particularly easy to train, so do approach this one with caution. It also has a really high thorn count. It is very thorny, especially in the lower growth down towards the ground where you're actually going to be training it. Upper growth tends to be fairly thornless as it produces flowers, but obviously all this kind of wood you're going to be pruning off during your autumn and winter pruning regimes. The bottom growth is still very thorny indeed. But this is climbing rose Madame Alfred carriere, one of the few roses roses. They're one of the few climbing roses that is going to flower relatively well for you in partial shade. I have mine, as they planted here on the east side of the cottage, receiving around 4 hours of direct sunlight per day. It's not early morning sun. It gets sun something in the region of about 10 a.m. through to about 12, something like that, 12:30, sometimes 2 o'clock, depending on where the sun moves and where the trees, where the leaves are. I've got a large stand of trees in front of me, and then a weeping willow just off to my right. I've got mine planted here, as you can see, with a vivid. I'm going to turn the camera ever so slightly. This might go horribly wrong now. There we go. I've got mine planted here with a deep cassis red clematis. That is Clematis Rebecca. Also, another really, really good climbing plant, a companion plant, along with Madame Alfred carriere, that also will do really well in partial and dapple shade. Again, receiving about 4 hours of direct sunlight per day. So this is Madame Alfred carriere, a strongly scented, repeat flowering, rambling or climbing rose, suitable for growing in partial shade on the north or an east facing aspect of the house. Not a brand new review from myself, but a revisited one of the very, very first review I have ever posted. And I'll make sure I capture some more media and bring this one up to standard with its full fragrance rating, disease resistance rating, thorn count, and all the rest of it in the caption below. I'll see you all again very soon. Take good care now. Bye-bye.